2019. Here we go. We have a ton of questions on tap, and immediately you're going to notice that I'm shooting this way instead of this way. And the reason that I'm doing that is because YouTube has taken it upon themselves to try and crop the aspect ratio of shooting portrait mode. And you go in, you look at it, and you can't see the question. And so I've gotten a lot of comments on that, so I apologize. But from here on out, we're going to be shooting in horizontal mode, which I actually prefer. And the reason that I did it before was because the convenience, instead of having to turn your phone this way, you could just keep it in your hand. But this is it. This is what we're going to get. We have a ton of questions on tap already, so let's go ahead and get right into those. And from here on out, I'll be putting the questions right up in this area. Oh, look at that. Kind of like Vanna White, right? I can put it on my hand. All right, let's get into it. Primarily what you want to do is find a balance in those export settings in Lightroom that's going to give you the best quality. And to do that, it's really going to be under image resizing, and you have to experiment with that based on the way you shoot. The additional settings that you need to take into consideration are those found in File Settings, and that gives you the quality of 0 to 100. And then also in your output where you're adding a low sharpening, but you don't want to do that if you're already adding sharpening before. Really good question here. My most portable setup is this Westcott Rapid box. It's just collapsible. I think it's 26 inch. And that's paired with my 580 EX2 flash. Perfect for one person. One of the advantages to using an agent is that there's an intermediary between you and the client. And as photographers, sometimes we just have a hard time selling ourselves. So if you feel like that's the best route for you, absolutely take it. Nothing wrong with that at all. This is such a great question because it's very fundamental. One of the fundamental things to being a photographer is seeing that light, utilizing it, knowing the type of quality of light that you're getting. Dawn and dusk light are some of the most fantastic times, but the light that I prefer to shoot in the most comes immediately following a rainstorm in the late evening in summertime. It's absolutely striking. The colors are naturally saturated, and the quality of light just drives me insane. Having said all that, that light is actually pretty rare to find, and you have to be in the right location and out at the right time. So dawn or dusk light, I prefer dusk light because I don't have to get up at dawn. This is probably one of the toughest questions that you will answer regardless of the category of photographer that you are, professional, semi-pro, amateur, hobbyist. You're going to have to ask yourself the question of, how do I price my work? My first bit of advice is this: don't be afraid to make money. Number two, you must cover your fixed cost. If it cost you $200 to get a print, you at least have to cover that. Number three, don't forget about pricing yourself into this equation. You're worth something, and a lot of times that's where our hang-up is figuring out what we're worth. How long have you been at this? What's your education? What's your experience? All that factors in. Several years ago, an artist sold a picture of a potato for $1 million. Are you paying $1 million for that potato, or are you paying $1 million for the artist's time, talent, expertise, and reputation? I say, find someone that'll buy that potato. I may not become a professional axe thrower, but I might be joining an axe throwing league, so I'll keep you posted on that. Thanks so much for asking about this. What I'll do is talk to Hannah from Circle Y Equine Photography, and then she also manages Cowboy Features. We'll see if we can pull that out of archive and perhaps upload it to YouTube, but either way, I'll let you know here. What I've done is linked my page that you can go to by swiping up, and it has my cameras, all my gear on it, and recommended cameras for you to start with. This old Canon AE1 still has film in it, and what it teaches us is to appreciate the process. But the digital world also gives us a much wider margin of error. So both have their ups and downs. This isn't necessarily a black and white answer. The answer to this is it depends, and let's make sure that we're all on the same page. I'll talk about what sending in your images to the copyright office does for you. Anytime I talk about copyright, I also want to give the disclaimer that I'm not an attorney. Everything that I talk about regarding copyright is my own experiences, reading the law, and also using my own attorney in situations where copyright has come up. With the disclaimer out of the way, when we send our images into the Copyright Office to get our copyright certificate, what that means is now we have full protection of the law. So we can go into court and we can ask for damages. There are a couple significant things that may happen once you file your images with the Copyright Office. Number one is you can file a lawsuit in federal court. Number two is you can recover actual damages for what you've lost. With any law, it is complicated. Talk to a qualified intellectual property attorney, and they can give you the whole range of options. I'm giving you things that have affected me, and there's caveats to every law. Really good question here, and there's several factors that come into play. Number one, for me, relationships. Number two, the art in motion. You know, a header and a healer coming around. There, I don't know. That just feels good in my soul, and I love covering it. And then, of course, the experiences that I've had with it. You know, for many, many years, I've covered the whole ranch life cycle, hashtag ranch life, but covered the whole life cycle, and it's something that I truly appreciate. The best way to do this, number one, come to my workshop in September and I'll walk you through it. Number two, turn your camera file setting to RAW, then upload them to your computer, and the program that you use generally will export them to JPEG. There are a couple programs that you can use, more than a couple, but two primarily that come to mind that you can use to develop your RAW and export to JPEG. One is Adobe Lightroom, and the next is Canon's Camera Raw. Yes, a vast majority are because you need to pay bills, but you're constantly working on those relationships. That's not something that goes away after a certain period of time. As a small business owner, we're always trying to develop new relationships. Well, I didn't know that there was a beard war going on, so... Oh, wait a minute. No, I just remembered. Maybe there is. Nope, not afraid of that at all. This is a really good question. As simple as it is, I was out in the snow yesterday shooting with Renee, and my jeans were just soaked, and I did not dress appropriately. So the first thing is dress appropriately. The second tip is this. In most commercial packaging, they come with these desiccant packs to keep moisture out, and then also these anti-mold. I take those and I put them in my camera bag because when you come in from the cold, your lenses fog up. These stay dry pouches and whatnot work really well in the humid environments that you find on the beaches as well. So yeah, they're free. Just grab them out of your packaging, put them in your camera bag. Thanks for asking this question. I actually started out with a 12.8 megapixel 5D full frame. This one's already sold, but it's more than enough. And nowadays, you're probably hard pressed to get one that's under 15 megapixels. So at a minimum, we're probably looking at cameras on the market right now in DSLR form that are minimums of like 15 megapixel. But that 24 by 36 right there on my wall was shot with that 12.8 megapixel 5D. So at the end of the day, if you're looking at used cameras, I probably wouldn't go below 10 megapixel. But if you're looking for a brand new camera, in the Canon lineup, your minimum you're going to get is about 16 megapixels. So more than enough. The simple answer is you get invited. It's not something that you take a classified ads out for, but for every event that I've gone to, I get invited to that. And that's why when people ask me if they can come along with me, my answer is no. The other piece to this is finding people that work within the Western world that maybe do some day work out on ranches or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with approaching and asking, but be prepared because the answer may be no. And finally on this question, if you do get access and you're able to go out and cover some ranch work, don't get in the way and always be respectful. Those two things will carry you through because it's one thing to have access, it's another to be accepted. Right, the dusty brandings can have a devastating effect on our cameras and our lenses. A couple tips here. Number one, don't disengage your lens from your body until you get home. That's the biggest tip. That'll really It is inevitable, however, that we will have dust spots on our sensor. Sometimes if I'm in a time crunch, I'll clean my own sensor, but most times I set it into Canon Professional Services. All of that said, when I do get home, I'll take my body and lens and use some compressed air and spray off the initial dust. And that's when I disengage the lens from the body, and then I'll spray those off as well. I kind of jumped ahead here in my last post, but yeah, my best practice is not disengaging my lens from my body before I start the dusting off process. And in time crunches, I will do my own sensor cleaning as well. I really recommend doing whatever is best for you. And if you've tried back button focusing and it works for you, then absolutely use it. But it's something I never took to, and it's not something I use.